The Matrix. What can I say about The Matrix that hasn't already been said? Let's find out, shall we? Spoilers ahead, make sure you've seen the movie. Made in 1999 by the Wachowskis. This is a film that made them famous as directors, of course. I'm going to focus here, as always, on basically the story structure and character arc. So, Matrix is a film that's often cited as an example of the hero's journey. Now, the hero's journey is a story paradigm devised by Joseph Campbell back in the day. He was an anthropologist, and it's become the template for many films. Lord of the Rings is essentially a hero's journey tale, even though that's before Joseph Campbell released his book, A Hero with a Thousand Faces. Star Wars, most famously, is an example of hero's journey. George Lucas very deliberately based the arc of Luke Skywalker on the template of the hero's journey. Matrix is another film that borrows quite a lot from the hero's journey in terms of the character archetypes and the arc itself for the central character of Neo. But I'm going to talk in terms of three-act structure, as I usually do, because to be honest, the hero's journey and the three-act structure in a modern cinematic context do map to each other very neatly. So, The Matrix has a three-act structure. We open with the Carrie-Anne Moss character, Trinity, on the run from the agents. So this introduces the world of the story. It was shot in Sydney, so a lot of it looks very familiar to me because I live in Sydney. And even though we don't establish what Trinity is, except that she's a cool girl in leather, but she's being chased by what presumably are FBI agents of some kind. And she has some certain magical abilities, it seems, as she runs from these agents. But we don't know if she's a good guy or a bad guy. We don't know if the agents are justified in chasing her or not. But she is our point of view character, so presumably she's one of the good guys. The next scene basically is when we meet Neo, or Mr. Anderson, in his apartment as a hacker, and he gets the message on the screen. That leads to Follow the White Rabbit. Which leads him ultimately to the nightclub where he meets Trinity.
It's the question that brought you here. You know the question, just as I did.
What is the Matrix?
This is our inciting incident. So unlike other stories, other heroes' journeys, usually we start with the inciting incident in the world around us, and we haven't met the protagonist yet. In this case, we do meet the protagonist up front, and they already are very curious about the big change that will affect them at the first act turning point. That point here, the call to adventure in hero's journey's language, is the moment he meets Morpheus face to face, and we have the scene with the pills.
You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Which, of course, is an allusion, as was the White Rabbit, to Alice in Wonderland, a portal story. This is, in effect, a portal story flipped on its head. Normally, a portal story, you start in the natural world, the world we all understand, and you go through whatever the portal is, the rabbit hole, the brick wall in Diagon Alley in Harry Potter, the wardrobe in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. You travel through that portal, you end up in a fantasy land, and you can always eventually travel back through the portal, back to the normal world. And that's what Hero's Journey does as well. You establish the normal world of our character, except in this case, in The Matrix, the normal world that is established turns out to be the fake world, turns out to be the fantasy. And the real world, the true normal world, is once he takes the pill and wakes up in his pod. So the first act turning point, or in Hero's Journey language, the crossing of the threshold, becomes the moment when Neo is awakened.
Welcome to the real world.
First half of Act 2 are the trials and tests of firstly using his body.
What are you doing? Your muscles have atrophied. We're rebuilding them.
Why am my eyes hurt?
You've never used them before.
But then once that's done, they start the training program.
Holy shit. Hey, Mikey, I think he likes it. How about some more? Hell yes.
He learns Kung Fu, and we have the fight sequence. And when the hero of your story, your Neo, your Luke Skywalker, your Hercules, if they have to train to become all that they can be, we should see them training and failing initially. And that's what Neo does. He struggles in his first fight with Morpheus, but he does make progress, ultimately. And then the big test is the jumping across the buildings. And Neo, of course, fails on the first try.
Everybody falls the first time.
The midpoint in this film is essentially when Neo is ready and they go back into the Matrix proper to meet the Oracle. And the key turning point here is when he meets the Oracle and she tells him,
"You already know what I'm going to tell you."
I'm not the one.
Sorry, kid.
and he's kind of relieved to hear that. This is the midpoint for the B story, which is Neo's arc, Neo's journey.
The Oracle will see you now.
He's told quite blankly by someone who should know he's not the one. But of course, it's a test. She just knows he's not ready to hear it yet. He needs to believe. This comes up in the film so many times. He needs to believe. It's not going to mean anything until he believes it himself. And he can only do that through action, really. He can't just be told you're the one. You have to believe it.
You'll remember you don't believe in any of this fate crap. You're in control of your own life. Remember?
So that's our B plot midpoint. The A plot midpoint is when we find out shortly before this scene that we have a traitor in our midst.
I'll get you what you want.
Access codes to the Zion mainframe.
No, I told you I don't know them. I can get you the man who does.
Morpheus.
This is Sci-Fi. In Hero's Journey jargon, this is a shapeshifter. This is an ally who turns into an enemy. All of these actions then lead to the massive chase and escape sequence that leads us to our second act turning point, which is Morpheus sacrifices himself to try and help them escape.
Must get Neo out! He's all that matters! No! No, Morpheus, don't!
This is the same beat as we find in Star Wars when Obi-Wan sacrifices himself to help them escape. No! And the same beat in Lord of the Rings, frankly, when Gandalf sacrifices himself when facing the Balrog to help them escape.
Fly, you fools!
In both of those cases, the mentor character dies, but is then resurrected as the White Wizard, and in the case of Obi-Wan, as a voice in Luke Skywalker's head, essentially, as a spirit. In the case of the Matrix, Morpheus does not die, but he is captured.
The future is our world, Morpheus. The future is our time.
As for the others, they're about to escape, and Sci-Fi kills the crew on the ship and unplugs everyone else, and they see them die before their eyes. And then there's just the two of them left, Neo and Trinity. This is the all is lost moment. Everyone has died, Morpheus is captured, and Sci-Fi is about to kill Neo. There's no way out. But then, of course, but still, all the rest of the crew are dead, with Morpheus captured. What do they do now? Neo needs to make a choice. Each of these turning points, the first and the second act turning point in particular, become major tests and choice moments for your central character. The first one, of course, was blue pill, red pill, choose. That's one of the clearest articulations, if you like, in cinema of that first act turning point choice moment. The choice in the second act turning point is, well, what's Neo going to do now? He's been told he's not the one. He's been told, in fact, by the Oracle that
One of you is going to die. Which one will be up to you.
if he goes back to save Morpheus, he will probably die. Nevertheless, he chooses to go back. They're going to save Morpheus, and of course the implication being, and we'll come out alive. So that becomes our third act. They go in to save Morpheus. They do. Morpheus and Trinity escape,
Neo,
but Neo is stuck in the Matrix with Agent Smith.
what is he doing?
He's beginning to believe.
And then there becomes a further chase as the agents chase him down, and Neo is killed. Neo's dead. And for several seconds, it looks like he's staying dead. He's not coming back. In Hero's journey, this becomes literally the resurrection moment. Now, it doesn't have to be a literal resurrection. It can be an emotional, psychological resurrection, and in most modern stories, that's what it is. But here we have a literal resurrection. This is the Christ allegory, after all. Trinity declares her love for him.
I love you.
And restores him to life.
Now get up.
What are you trying to tell me? That I can dodge bullets?
No, Neo. I'm trying to tell you that when you're ready, you won't have to.
One of the arguments here about The Matrix, I certainly had this with a class recently when we discussed this film, is that the characters are not very well drawn. Now, sure, this is an action film, and there's a lot of set-piece action moments in it. The moments where we do have characters talking about themselves and their beliefs and their dreams, they give us a hint of their character, but there's not really a lot of depth to any of the characters in particular. Morpheus is simply the mentor character who believes and is there to teach. Trinity is there to be the girl who falls in love with him, more than anything else, frankly. Neo is simply there to be the one who will realize his true purpose. But who he is, what his childhood was like, what his hopes and desires are beyond that, aren't made very clear. In fact, the one character who kind of gets a chance to really articulate their hopes and desires, their goals, is Agent Smith, when he talks to Morpheus in his villain monologue moment.
I hate this place. This zoo, this prison, this reality, whatever you want to call it. I can't stand it any longer. It's the smell.
This is in part, of course, due to Hugo Weaving's performance, but Agent Smith is perhaps the most well-rounded character in The Matrix. Everyone else is essentially an archetype. And within Hero's journey, we have this. We have the hero, the mentor, the shapeshifter, the allies. And they don't tend to go beyond those archetypes very much. Now, we do get a bit more detail about the world and about these the characters and about the history for Neo in the later films. As much as you might argue about how good the second and third film and now the fourth film are, there is more backstory given to us in those films, and we get to go to Zion and things like that. So what is the character arc for Neo in The Matrix? What is the theme of the film? Well, the spine is, what is The Matrix? So the spine of the story, to my view, is the concept that holds together the A-plot. And in this case, the A-plot is The Matrix versus the real world and the action of all the characters to combat the agents and discover the one, in the case of Morpheus in particular. The theme represents the journey for the central character. The central character is Neo. What is the central thing that drives his journey? The theme, because it seems to come up a lot, is fate versus free will.
You don't believe in any of this fate crap. You're in control of your own life.
And this becomes a very big philosophical topic, obviously. Is Neo fated to be the one? Can he change that fate? Does he have any control over it? And does he, or anyone else in this story, have free will? When after everything goes wrong, Neo makes a choice. This is what choices are, right? That's free will in action. He makes a choice to go back and save Morpheus. Free will is real. This is what the end of the film basically tells us with his resurrection. We do have free will. We can make choices that make a difference. And that's the lesson that Neo needs to learn. He doesn't really believe that for most of the film. They keep telling him he's the one.
I'm fairly excited to see what you're capable of. If Morpheus is right, no. We're not supposed to talk about this. But if you are, it's a very exciting time.
He just needs to believe it. He doesn't believe it until literally the moment he resurrects. And the thing that triggers that, because after all, there's a love story in the middle of all of this, the thing that triggers that is Trinity. One thing they establish in the film early on is,
if you're killed in the Matrix, you die here?
The body cannot live without the mind.
okay, this becomes a deeper philosophical question about emergent consciousness. Does consciousness emerge from the brain and brain activity? Or is brain activity and the mind emergent from some other non-physical thing, a spirit, a soul? Where does consciousness and mind come from? This is the fundamental question here. But it's set up that if the mind believes it's dead within the matrix, then the body in the real world dies with it, because they are separated effectively. Neo proves that this is not true. He does die in the matrix, but he's not actually dead because he can resurrect. He believes he's dead temporarily for a few seconds until the voice of Trinity brings him back, essentially, and the kiss brings him back. Love will conquer all, after all.
I think we can handle one little girl. I sent 2 units. They're bringing her down now.
No, Lieutenant, your men are already dead.
One of my students brought up, for example, why don't the agents simply transport themselves into the bodies of the policemen? They can do that, can't they? They show that later in the film, that they can do that. Well, you don't want to give away too many of the secrets too soon. This is the first time we meet them, after all. And we're still learning who they are. We want to keep a bit of mystery. But yeah, it's kind of a plot hole. If they could have done that then, why didn't they? And there's other places in this film where there's arguably plot holes and things that don't quite make sense or things that aren't quite fully explained. But I think that doesn't matter, honestly. What matters is the emotional impact this moment is having and how that leads to the next moment and the next moment. More than anything else. Yes, it's good for a story to be consistent and for everything to tie together happily at the end. And usually a good film will. But if there's a couple of beats that don't quite make sense, or because you could have explained it, after all, they do in the second and third film a lot more about the way this world works. They could have done that in the first film. But then there's more dialogue scenes, more exposition that we really don't need and just slows things down. So I think they found a really good balance between explaining the world enough that we get what's going on, not explaining too much that it kind of undercuts the emotional journey of Neo in particular. It's a fairly well-balanced action film, and this is what you get with action films. Less character development, more plot. And where we want the character and emotional journey, the plot becomes secondary. Anyway, that's my take on The Matrix. Hope you enjoyed that. Any budding filmmakers out there, check out my book if you want to learn more about this kind of stuff. Thanks for watching. My name is Phil. I'll see you next time.